Hey, good evening. Welcome to episode 40 of the NOTCAST. I am here in my man cave surrounded by all my music. And today, episode 40, going to be talking about what I regard to be the second best U2 album. It is Achtung Baby. Achtung Baby. And as you've probably already noticed, every episode I have a thematically correct or appropriate or related t-shirt. That's probably going to become a little bit difficult when I start to talk about very early albums by very old bands indeed. But let's pretend I didn't mention it. So, last episode talked about the best of 80 to 90, which was released in 1998. Talked about the unofficial bootleg releases of leaked and stolen demo and studio recordings that became Achtung Baby. But today we're talking about the genuine, actual album itself. And as a result, let's start off with a little bit of scene setting. So it's late 1991, and the Wonder Stuff and Vic Reeves are number one with Dizzy. At the time, the Wonder Stuff were probably in my top two bands, very possibly actually my number one, and I will talk about that band in another episode. But they had the unusual and unique position of a number one single with this cover of Dizzy, which I think they last performed at Shepherd's Bush Empire in 2006 in December. I should know, I was there. And the Wonder Stuff are the band that I still have the record of seeing the most out of all the bands that I've seen all across the world, that I've seen hundreds of times. I've been to thousands of gigs, and the Wonder Stuff I'm on, I think, 167 times. And no, I don't get bored. It's like watching your favourite football team. People go to see Spurs or whoever every Saturday in the days when we could have football matches. Never got boring. And when the lineup changes, some of the songs change. Sometimes they win, sometimes they lose. You know, when I go and see one of my favourite bands, never get bored. Still don't get bored. And I'm at the same age now that Patrick Stewart was when he started filming Star Trek The Next Generation. So you think maybe I would? No. Now the question is, do you get old because you stop dreaming, or do you stop dreaming because you get old? The answer is, you stay young on the inside. So 1991 saw the release of an unusual and possibly unexpected release. But here it is, The Fly by U2. This was the first single from the album Achtung Baby. And at the time that it came out, I don't think anybody really knew what they were expecting. They were expecting new U2 stuff. They weren't sure what it was going to sound like. There were rumours that the band were doing weird and unusual German music. They were recording at Hansa Studios in Berlin. They'd gone weird and arty. To be honest, at the time, I figured, well, when the album comes out, I'll make a decision about whether I still like the band or not. And the reason I say that is because, as we've seen with the previous episodes, the 80s was a period where U2 were very, very sincere, very straight, very, very direct. They wore their hearts on their sleeves, and their hearts were bleeding, and they told you how they felt about absolutely everything that was going on. And there was no guile in that. There was no deception in it. It was very straightforward, and you really knew what the band were thinking. And then all of a sudden, this bad boy appears, and you don't quite know what it is. You stick it onto the deck, take the vinyl out. Okay. Put it on. Let's say you start with a 7-inch mix, and you get this weird and unusual noise coming out of it. And you're like, okay, so that's a new and new. Ed just bought a new effects pedal. And then there's this, rampaging groove. The kind of thing that you also heard on Night and Day a little bit, but amplified, darker, dirtier. And then the lyrics come out around, it's no secret that a conscience can sometimes be a pest. No secret that ambition bites the nails of success. It's no secret. And then all of a sudden you're kind of going, okay, so this is not my this is not my dad's U2, this is a different U2. You know, and at this point the band was still relatively young. I think if any of them were 30, it was just 30, you know, just 30, maybe 32 or something at most, you know. And all of a sudden I thought, okay, so that's a bit of a weird left-wing turn. And a lot of bands do this. They put out a single to start off the album, and it kind of throws you a little, because they know that people are going to be interested in it. So the first single, is the advert for the album. We have a lot of bands of the similar era are putting out strange songs as their first singles, because they can rely on a certain degree of built-in sales and interest. The Cure did it with 13th. Depeche Mode did it with Personal Jesus and I Feel You and Barrel of a Gun. You know, New Order did it to an extent with Fine Time, which was a completely left turn compared to their other stuff. And U2 did it with The Fly. And you didn't quite know what was going to happen there. I mean, personally though, I was absolutely overjoyed, because in the 3 years since Rattle and Hum came out, you know, the world had changed dramatically. And so therefore, when Achtung Baby came out, this is an original 1991, I think it's a UK pressing. It has Adam's Adam on it, as I mentioned previously. Came out. I bought the cassette because it was cheaper of this album, and I didn't quite know what I was going to get. I wasn't sure about this album when it came out. I'll be really honest about it. I didn't know whether I'd grown out of U2. I didn't know whether they'd grown away from me. So it took a couple of months after it came out before I bought it. And I bought the cassette second hand from a stall in Leicester in around about November 1991. So I hadn't heard Zoo Station. I hadn't heard any of the songs on it apart from The Fly. And I wasn't convinced that The Fly was the right song for it. I thought, I thought The Fly sounded like a good song, but I wasn't sure if it was the best song at all. And so I thought, okay, well, I'll buy the album. I'm not sure. I'll buy the cassette. It was £3.49. Same thing with my copy of Nirvana's Nevermind, actually, £3.49, although that was on vinyl and that jumped like a bastard. Probably because it had been played a lot. So, Achtung Baby came out, and I wasn't sure if I still liked U2, but I bought it, I put it on, and they went from being a band that I thought maybe possibly I'd grown out of, to a band that I was in for the rest of my life. If nothing else had happened, if they'd split up on Zoo TV, so sure, I'd be pissed I'd never seen them. But there'd be a band that did that one incredible album that no one was expecting. Now, there's a concept in art, culture, science called multiple discovery, and I think I've mentioned this before, where people discover roughly the same thing at roughly the same time. So you can think about, for example, films about earthquakes, Joe versus the volcano, for example, versus something else, volcano maybe, Armageddon and Deep Impact, you know, those type of things where people come to the same conclusion but using different methods. Tesla versus Edison, you know, VHS versus Beta, all these forms of technology and ideas and invention all happening at roughly the same time by people that aren't talking to each other and aren't stealing from each other. And the concept of multiple discovery came here as well, because The Fly was released before Nirvana's Nevermind was released, and before, it might have been after Smells Like Teen Spirit came out, but without knowing that's where the rest of the world was going to go, U2 somehow read the tea leaves, and they kind of sensed that the world was going to go in a different direction. So the age of, you know, chest beating, white flag waving stoic rock was over. Smells Like Teen Spirit came out, which no one really expected as a hit. You know, I knew Nirvana, and I bought Bleach. I didn't think it was particularly good, to be honest, and neither did many other people, because when Nevermind came out, Geffen Records printed 50,000, and they thought they'd be lucky to get that many copies sold, and obviously it sold something like 20,000 million gazillion copies ever since. But The Fly and Achtung Baby were written, recorded, finalised and sent to press before any members of U2 had heard Nevermind. Now, lots of other bands decided that they were going to follow the zeitgeist, so to speak, and they were going to copy what U2 had done. But the problem is that they became imitators followers instead of leaders. Now, I'm going to mention a couple of bands that I definitely don't like that didn't do this correctly. So you think about everyone suddenly copied U2 and Nirvana and grunge. Everyone was going, well, I'm going to be gritty, I'm going to be urban, I'm going to be meaningful, I'm going to wear ripped jeans, but I'm not going to wear spandex, I'm going to cut my hair, I'm going to go from Def Leppard's Adrenalize to Slang, and Slang is a shit album, by the way. I'm going to do a Motley Crue, I'm going to get dirty and gritty, and I'm not going to talk about Dr. Feelgood anymore. I'm going to do a Bon Jovi, and I'm going to talk about Keeping the Faith or an In Excess, and we're all going to wear dirty clothes, as if somehow they got all the trappings, all the wrappings, but they hadn't got what they needed to have. And what they needed to have was the thing that was in them that you can't fake. So even though U2 were doing all of this stuff, all of this surface is depth, all of the armor that went with it, U2 still had at the heart of it, deep inside, Achtung baby, they had a deep and clear sincerity. And this was a perfect album for me, because I was coming to the age, I was 18. I'd outgrown sincerity. I wanted guile, I wanted deception, I wanted playfulness, I wanted people to work with the medium, to break the work, to break the idea that somehow, if you just shined a light onto it and it was true, people would believe it. It was like, no, what colour light are you going to shine on it? How far are you going to show it? How much shadow are you going to have in there? That's what made Achtung Baby a fascinating album and one of U2's best, because they had a playfulness with them, with an idea of lyrics like a woman needs a man like a fish needs a bicycle. They had a sincerity to them as well. Some of the lyrics on this album are heartbreaking, and I'll be really honest, Achtung Baby is probably the closest thing that U2 ever came to a strong, powerful artistic statement where you can strip everything away. It's the Divorce album, where you've got people that are tearing each other to pieces but believe in the same things. You've got lyrics about, there's a silence that comes to our house where no one can sleep. You've got lyrics inside Acrobat, which is I must be an acrobat to look like this and act like that. All of this stuff was in there. And it's an album, but really, if you think about it and you follow the lyrical path through the album, it is one of the most powerful divorce records ever made. It's up there in savagery, I think, in some respects, with Hear My Dear, and with Blood on the Tracks, and with some other albums about divorce, probably The Wall as well, actually, just in terms of there's a lot of misery that's packed inside these grooves. And so in order to protect themselves from that misery, the band have put on armour. They've put on layers that cover and sound and obscure the songs. So Zoo Station, for example, covered in effects pedals, covered in unusual sounds, new rhythms, new textures, new approaches to structure. So things like, although it's a very conventional album in terms of it having verse, chorus, middle eight break, and chorus, and then repeat and fade, but it's a very unusual album because it's not taking the direct path from A to B. But Achtung Baby takes you from A to B, but it goes via C, H, T, U, N, and G. And by the way, I hadn't rehearsed that. That just popped into my head while I was thinking with my mouth open. It's very dangerous. Don't try it at home, kids. And the other thing about Achtung Baby is that the name of the album really gives you a sense of what the album's actually about. So it works on three layers. The first one is it's a quote from the producers. It's all a show and it could go tragically wrong. Achtung, baby! The second one is it's about a warning about the dangers of childhood and the dangers of parenthood. Achtung, baby! And then also about a relationship, because someone could be a baby. You're my baby, like my way. And that's another thing, is danger relationships, when you can translate that. Achtung, a baby. Achtung, a child. It's a warning about relationships, about parenthood, around the fact that everything sits inside a presentation, takes the piss out of the producers. And if I remember correctly, it doesn't have an exclamation mark on it, so it's not a direct quote from the producers, but it's something that's very, very similar. A literate album with a broken heart, and because the subject matter is really dense on this. I watched Gone Girl. We watched Gone Girl the other day, and this reminds me a lot of Gone Girl in so much as it approaches talking about relationships, about deception, about honesty, about compromise, about acceptance, about the 5 stages of grief, that come at the end of a relationship. It's a broken heart with guitars. It's very, very aware of that. And at the same point, it says, actually, to quote Oscar Wilde, a man can be most true when he is wearing a mask. And U2 are all wearing masks in this album. There's all artifice, there's all cover around it, there's armour that they're covering the songs in, protective armour. The imagery that we've got is that, this isn't the U2 that you remember. This isn't the wankers with hats. No. This is the band that, wearing masks on the cover, and they're dressed differently. It's not the same band. It's the same people, but they've changed and they've evolved, and they're wearing makeup and armour and defensive positions. And it's even, there's even an element of saying, well, actually, there's an analogy around that and the fall of the Berlin Wall. Now, I might be thinking far too much about this. It wouldn't be the first time I've thought far too much about music. It's certainly not going to be the last. And also, as became apparent, is that there was the baby image, the graffiti that was scrawled on the wall of the Windmill Lane Studios, and was there for about a day and a half, which is a picture of a small baby, and that is the baby which I think had an influential role upon the album. Actually, is that image of that little child that was there, which is also a boy, which leads back to the first U2 album. So this was the album where U2 stopped being a great band and they became great artists. This is a great artistic statement. It's fascinating musically. Lyrically, it works on many, many different layers. And if you follow the lyrics that go through the album, and I'll talk through the album sequence as well, because the album sequence is not unintentional. It's not strictly designed around musical content either, like U2 set lists, is that this album is structured as a concept album that takes you through a loose thematic narrative that journeys from song to song to song to song. So Zoo Station, for example, is the start of a relationship. I'm ready for the laughing gas. I'm ready for what comes next. I'm glad to be alive. I'm ready for the push. And there's a sexual element to that lyric, but also there's an element about leaving the past behind. Time is a train, makes the future the past. It leaves you standing in the station with your face pressed up against the glass. And it also ties in with Zoo Station itself, which is on, I think, the U2 line in Berlin, which is where the band recorded the album. And they recorded it at Hansa Studios. So they've also gone to the reinvention at Hansa Studios to take into effect the fact that David Bowie, Iggy Pop, Tangerine Dream, Depeche Mode, lots of great bands recorded at Hansa Studios. And there is a documentary about Hansa Studios, which I think is called Standing by the Wall, which is an essential watch if you want to understand the importance that Hansa Studios and the mindset that came with it sits inside all of those bands. Actually, are really, really important. And having been to Hansa, although we didn't go in because it was closed, it's quite an experience. Is to stand there and to go to the restaurant that's next door to Hansa Studios and know that David Bowie probably pissed in the same toilet as the one I'm currently pissing in. That's probably overshare for you, but there you go. So Zoo Station starts off, it's the opening of a relationship, and then you've got, even better than The Real Thing, is the second song, which is Give Me One More Chance and You'll Be Satisfied. And it's kind of like saying, baby, I'm ready for this ride. I'm even better. I'm presenting to you a version of me that's better than actually ever it could possibly exist. I'm even better than The Real Thing. And it's about the nature of projection, about image, about identity, about going forwards and going, no, I'm something that's a bit more complicated than you think I am. You think I'm just a bloke with a hat and a white flag that runs around on a stage, and I'm much, much more complicated than that. And this was where U2 went from being, a band that was great at being able to articulate their thoughts into being great and to be able to mould and form their thoughts and turn them into something that's more interesting than that. And then we've got One as the third track, and I think we all know that song. It's probably been played at far too many weddings. It's a divorce song. It's about people tearing each other apart, but trying not to, believing in the same thing, knowing that they're together, but they're not the same. They're two halves of the same whole, the yin and the yang, the night and the day. The one cannot exist without the existence of the other, in the way that you can't know hate without knowing love, and you can't know love without knowing hate. All those things. You can't know joy without knowing sadness, otherwise everything would be joyful, and then it would become boring and mundane. And as a quote in a film which I saw when I was very, very young, is when there was a woman that was I think it was a 1986 film, I think, and I can't remember where it was set now, but they woke up and it was another beautiful day in the mansion. and they opened the curtains and they went, oh God, another fucking beautiful day, because it gets boring, it gets the same, you know. And then we've got Until the End of the World as the fourth song, which starts to kind of throw in some biblical references, throw in some analogies, even when they play it live. Bono sings Jesus, This Is Judas. It's a song from Judas to Jesus about betrayal. And as I said earlier, when U2 write songs about God, they write songs and they rephrase God and they're talking about you, and then you start to think about love as being the subject as opposed to God, and then there's the famed statement that God is love. And all these songs are about a crisis of faith, a betrayal, a start and end, and the lifespan of a relationship as it goes through, and how that all intercedes together. So it could be about a man losing his faith with God. It could be about a couple coming to the end of a relationship. It could be about someone questioning their very belief system. And the fact is that U2 have gone to be abstract, obtuse. They're starting to tackle those subjects. It's a work of art. Achtung, baby. It's a work of art that you can play air guitar to, and there are not many of those in the world. There's certainly not enough. It's one of the most literate albums which has been released by a mainstream rock band in a very, very long time. And it then goes to Who's Going to Ride Your Wild Horses. So again, that's talking about, you're dangerous because you're honest. It's kind of saying, well, actually, deception, and being dishonest, being obtuse, being awkward with the truth is really important. And you're an accident waiting to happen. I know when you tell me things I know you're not supposed to, then you leave me just out of reach. And there's an element of confessional around the album as well. It's around type of things that people say to each other late at night that they never want to hear repeated in the daylight. And then that's repeated elsewhere when they talk about a silence that comes to the house where no one can sleep, and I guess that's the price of love. I know that's not cheap, from Ultraviolet. So all of these songs all fit together in this huge thematic kind of spider web of ideas around love and betrayal and loss. And it's a staggering album to listen to. Now, you might have noticed I really, really listen to the words in albums. I think the words are really bloody important, and they make an album absolutely essential. And a good album with bad words is certainly worse to me than a bad album with great words. And let me not talk about the differences between various members of Pink Floyd when it comes to talking about that. So it's a literate album. It clearly deals with the life and death and the stages of a relationship. And each side is almost a relationship in itself. So, side one ends with So Cruel, which I don't think the band ever played live, or if they did, it was only acoustic and only a couple of times. But then side two, again, opens with the well-known, well-loved The Fly, the song that knocked Dizzy off number one. And there's a certain poetic justice in that, is that The Fly is about deception. You listen to the lyrics, and it's been played live on almost every tour. It wasn't played on Pop Mart, but aside from that, it was played on in some form on every tour apart from Pop Mart and the Joshua Tree 2017 tour. By the way, it was played a handful of times on the Innocence and Experience tour, where Bono sang along to a pre-recorded track underneath the stage during the intermission. By the way, and The Fly is very, very clearly around. It's no secret that a liar won't believe anyone else. And about a man will beg and a man will crawl on the sheer face of love like a fly on a wall. It's no secret at all. And it's all around the difference, the gap between reality and artifice. The next song on there, which is Mysterious Ways, which is the second single from the album, very clearly also kind of points out that it's all a bit of a mystery. It's all right, she moves in mysterious ways, and if you haven't noticed up to that point that the band are using love as an analogy for God, and that God moves in mysterious ways and she moves in mysterious ways, you're not paying attention. You know all the words to all the pretty songs, but you don't know what they mean. But I suspect you do. Now, the only song that the band haven't played live after the Zoo TV tour is Trying to Throw Your Arms Around the World. And Trying to Throw Your Arms Around the World is for me almost like a palate cleanser. It's the moment at the end of the action scene where everyone stares at each other and go, whoa, that was real. and then they go back into it again. So we watched also a 1972 film, The Poseidon Adventure, last night. It's older than I am, but it's a perfect example of pacing and editing and structure, is that the film doesn't need the moments where the characters talk to each other to process what just happened. But if the film doesn't give you the opportunity to process what just happened, you don't get the opportunity to process what just happened, and therefore you feel kind of numbed, battened down, worn down to a flat, crisp edge where you just can't take the intensity of it. So the film needs those character moments, and Trying to Throw Your Arms Around the World is a character moment in the album. It's just a gentle, silly song, just a little moment of not light but levity, because there's still darkness that sits in the heart of it. But the light comes in Ultraviolet Light My Way, which is the next song, which is the 10th song on the album, been played many times live. Certainly brought back for 2009 to 2011 on the 360 tour, and also on the Joshua Tree tour, where it was repurposed as a song around female empowerment and gender equality. But it's on this album, it's a song about, you know, I need you to be strong, and the day is as dark as the night is long, and I'm in the black, can't see or be seen. And it's all around that. It's all around how you look to others, which is also a line that, by the way, that turns up in Lemon, you know. And these are the days where we look to each other, where you look to other people to give you guidance through that. Light my way, that goes through it. And there's also a line about, you know, now we lie together in whispers and moans, and when I was all messed up and I heard opera in my head, your love was a light bulb hanging over my bed. You know, that's a lyric. It's very clear lyric about the words that people speak to each other in darkness that should never be heard in daylight. But it also introduces the salmon of doubt into the lyrics of the album. And then finally we've got Acrobat and Love is Blindness. Now Acrobat is a song that's legendary, and the band didn't play it live until 2018. I don't know why they didn't play it for 27 years after it came out, but they should have done. But Acrobat really is almost like a mission statement across the whole of Achtung Baby. Don't believe what you hear. Don't believe what you see. If you close your eyes, you can feel the enemy. It's about knowing instinctively when something isn't quite right. And it's got sexual lyrics about swallow and spit, and it's got ideas about, you know, I must be an acrobat to talk like this and act like that. And it's around the contradictions that people have inside relationships. On one hand, you know, when you go into a relationship, you're somebody that wants to have hedonism and joy, and then on the other hand, you're the guy that wants to knuckle down and be, you know, sober and responsible and a mature adult. And about also the twists and turns that people make. So when a relationship comes to an end, you want to say, oh yeah, I'm the good person in this, I'm the better person than my ex. And at the same point, sometimes you're then texting things like, I wish you would fucking die, which, by the way, I don't think I've ever texted to anybody. But it's around how people get those moments where they do these huge forms of intellectual and emotional contortions to make out that somehow they're the good person when they're not. You know, or as I prefer to think of it, the Gaslighters. And if there isn't a band called the Gaslighters, there should be. And then the final song on the album is Love is Blindness, which has, you know, almost all despair and heartbreak is channeled into that rotating guitar riff that comes at the end of the song, you know. And Love is Blindness, I don't want to see when you wrap the night around me. And there is not one word that is out of place on this album. There is not one word that's wrong on the whole of the record. These lyrics tell the story of a commitment and a power and a love, and also that commitment and power and love being you know, broken and torn apart through with the best will and the best intentions by people's the difference between people that are one and not the same. It goes all the way through the album. And by the way, that's the end of the album, Love is Blindness. You know, those last words. So it's a loose story around perception and reality, and around being ready for love, but also knowing that with love comes despair. And it stows from the adrenaline rush of Zoo Station at the start, which specifically Zoo Station is a station that starts it's not the start of a line, it's in the middle of a line, but it also is from a station you can go anywhere, you can go in any direction that you like. And this album actually is probably far more of a musical journey than Rattle and Hum. Rattle and Hum was a journey, and it didn't tell you where it was going or where it was coming from. This very clearly points out we're starting at Zoo Station, and we're going to go to a little death without warning, with no and that's where the album goes. It takes your heart, it gives you that adrenaline rush, and then it breaks it. And it's one of the best albums about a relationship ever. I've only talked about the lyrical side of the album. I haven't talked about the visuals, I haven't talked about the sound, I haven't talked about the sonics or anything like that, and I haven't talked about Zoo TV, because Zoo TV, I think, should be dealt with as a completely separate entity. Now, the recording for Achtung Baby was very strained. It was recorded over 4 sessions at 3 studios. So it was first recorded at STS Studios in Dublin, where they did, I think, Where Did It All Go Wrong, Salome, Fortunate Son, Paint It Black, and Lady with a Spinning Head. Although they did come back to the studio, I think they also had one session at Hansa, which was produced by Daniel Lanois, which birthed Zoo Station, Acrobat, and So Cruel. Then Brian Eno was at Hansa, and they did One Until the End of the World, So Cruel, The Fly, Mysterious Ways, and Trying to Throw Your Arms Around the World. And there was a third session, which I think mostly was at Windmill Lane, which was even better than The Real Thing, and Who's Going to Ride Your Wild Horses. And Who's Going to Ride Your Wild Horses is the most obviously U2-ish of old single that came from the album. And when the band were recording, I think what we're looking at a real amalgam of influences. Larry apparently was listening to Jimi Hendrix and the Blues. Edge was listening to a lot of bands like Front 242, Young Gods, Nights of Ebb, Nick Cave, Pill. And so what we've got is 2 very, very different approaches to music, and somehow in the middle of that, this amazing, well, not amazing, but this unique combination of weird and traditional kind of pulled it together. So they could have done 2 things. They could have written really weird songs and recorded them very, very traditionally, or they could have written very traditional songs and recorded them very weirdly and presented them in these barnacles of sound, these protective layers of U2 wearing the shades. And as he said on the tour, you didn't like me when I was me, so I came back as someone else. And through this period, and by the way, I've not touched upon Zoo TV for a reason, is that at the point when Achtung Baby came out, it didn't exist. Nobody knew what Zoo TV was. What we knew about U2 is that Bono had got a new pair of sunglasses, they got a slightly unusual cover, and they'd done a single called Mysterious Ways, which had for the first time a huge amount of dance remixes on it. Now, I'm going to very quickly touch upon the next step that we have, which is after Mysterious Ways came out as a single, is that we had One released as a single. Now, the first time anybody saw any part of the Zoo TV tour was when One was performed on BBC's Top of the Pops during an afternoon's rehearsal. That was the first time that you saw it. So at that point, that's where the rumours were that the band had got lots of television screens. They were doing this really weird new multimedia presentation, but nobody had seen anything, nobody knew anything, and as far as we were concerned, what U2 were doing was completely unknown. Now, this was the first single from the album which didn't have one of the traditional images. Now, I'm going to quickly, at least I really hope I am, I'm going to quickly put together, if I've got enough hands, there's a triptych. So you buy the 4 singles which aren't one off the album, and you can put them together to create an image of the band sat in a car, the Trabant car. So, and you just imagine that there's a 4th hand up there holding this one in. So you can put those together, and you can see that the band are sat in a car going somewhere. These 4 singles exist together as part of a bigger picture. Hang on a moment, I'm going to quickly just bring this down here and show you that there. Hopefully you can see there's the singles, and that's